Following the Thread, Part 2. So if you haven't watched the first part, please check it out. I think it's like 8 minutes long, basically just a primer or an overview on Joseph Campbell's concept of the hero's journey, or monomyth. And so following up, I just wanted to provide a little bit more clarity around some of the concepts and ideas that I discussed in that video. I also delivered this as a talk at the wonderful Capital Unitarian Universalist congregation, I think a couple weeks ago. So after the service, they always have a forum, and there were some questions that came up, and many of those questions served as kind of the inspiration for this video. So I'll attempt to kind of clarify the things that came up during that forum, because if the people at Capital had questions or points of contention over certain ideas that I expressed in that talk, then chances are maybe some of you have similar ones. So I figured I'd just nail those down. A couple things that came up in the forum that I think are common misconceptions about the hero's journey. Number one, this is a spiritual journey. Sometimes it's accompanied by a physical journey, physical adventure, but that part of it is secondary and it's not necessary. You can have the hero's journey without actually going anywhere, without physically traveling anywhere, or even experiencing any kind of physical calamity. Some people, their journey is, illness, or some kind of physical accident or something, right? And by going through the physical hardship, they undergo a spiritual transformation, which is essentially what this whole thing's about. It's entirely possible to have the spiritual side of it, which is the true essence of the hero's journey, without actually physically going anywhere or experiencing anything out of the ordinary. So I just wanted to clarify that, because that was a question that kind of came up in different forms during the forum, right? People were saying, I feel like I was on my hero's journey. I went to college and I got a degree, and now I was supposed to cross the threshold and get a job and have a career, and I've been stalled because of the pandemic, because of the economy. And so my response to those types of comments is to say that you thought that was your adventure, and in fact that was what we would call in the monomythic terms, that was actually the ordinary world, right? The world that you thought you were going to get, the familiar, safe, predictable world. What you're getting now is the true hero's journey, the adventure. The fact that you're now being plunged into the unknown. You don't know what's going to happen. Your expectations, your plans are out the window. That is where we learn about ourselves, truly learn about ourselves, not on a superficial level, but on a deep, more authentic level. We discover things about ourselves in times of difficulty and hardship, whether physical or psychological. And those are the qualities that we bring back with us, so to speak, in the ordinary world. Another point that came up was the idea that the hero is the warrior archetype. And that came up a few times, and understandably so. Even if you look at some of the examples that I've used in the past, or some of the sort of best examples of the hero's journey in modern cinema, you get things like The Matrix, Star Wars, Gladiator, for a couple examples there. And in all of those movies, the hero is the warrior. In reality, the warrior is one of many heroic archetypes, and just because it's become sort of the de facto or the favorite archetype in Hollywood or in modern literature or whatever, what have you, that doesn't mean that that's the only archetype. And in fact, it's, in my opinion, the least relevant archetype today. We don't need any more warriors. The warrior archetype is played out. And anyways, in future videos on this topic, we can even talk about the warrior archetype in more detail. And as you'll see, there are many layers to the warrior archetype. And the warrior who fights for himself and for glory and or out of vengeance, right? That's the pseudo warrior. It's not actually the warrior archetype. The true archetype fights for a cause greater than him or herself, and has the interests of others front of mind. So very different. But irregardless, oh my God, I can't believe I just said that. I'm not going to edit it. I'm going to leave it right in there. Irregardless, there are many other archetypes, and I believe that we can learn a lot more from these other archetypes than we can from the warrior. Although the warrior, again, has lots to teach us, and not to totally dismiss it, but it's not the primary or even the most important archetype out there. So yeah, get the idea out of your mind. It's not about slaying everything. It's not about being a big burly macho man. That's just one image, and it's becoming fast irrelevant anyway. Another point that came up that my wife kindly reminded me about just now is the fact that you're the hero of your own story, but at the exact same time, you are part of the supporting cast of somebody else's story. And not just somebody else, but everybody that you know, right? Anybody that you have any kind of relationship with. And in some cases, even people you don't know, right? You might enter their adventure and you're just a blip on the map. But for a little while there, if you have an encounter with a stranger, you're entering into their story and you become part of their supporting cast. So it's really important to remember that and to hold both ideas in mind if you're going to run with this metaphor or use it in your life. Don't just focus on the fact that you're the hero of your story or the protagonist of your story. Also remember that you're part of somebody else's supporting cast. And do you want to play the role of a mentor in their life? Do you want to play the role of a trickster? Do you want to play the role of the big bad guy? These are questions to consider. Again, if you're working within this framework or this model. So, excellent point. Thank you, Candace. I think essentially what the hero's journey comes down to at the spiritual or the psychological level is going within yourself, discovering who or what you truly are, and then returning to the outside world and embodying what you just learned about yourself and being more of that. And I think the reason this is so heroic is because the world, despite waxing poetically and positively about individuality and being yourself and loving yourself, I think it gives us conflicting messages. I think that's that part of the message is lip service, and in reality, standing up for what you believe in, even if it means putting yourself at odds with the people you love or your community, being who you truly are, even when people in your life might tell you not to be that or tell you that you're not that, right? It takes a lot of courage to go within and to take an honest gander at what and who you truly are, and then to come out into the world and embody that is the summation of the adventure. It's the return. Real life examples of the hero's journey that I've come across over the years. The first one I wanted to share with you is Andy's journey of liberation from the Jehovah's Witness cult. If you don't know who Andy is, he's probably one of the first, if not the first person to regularly follow my videos and comment on them. And over the years, I've had the pleasure and the privilege of getting to know him, personally. He was on the channel. He was on the Big Questions podcast at least once, maybe twice. So if you're curious to know about his story and his life, I'll put up a link for that video. But anyway, his story is a classic example of the hero's journey. Born and raised in the Jehovah's Witness cult, indoctrinated into it, and then over the span of about 9 months, he deconverted, got out, and that for a Jehovah's Witness to get out, that means you're giving up all of your friends, all of your family. And not only that, you're giving up the stability and the clarity and the simplicity of having everything figured out for you, right? The Jehovah's Witness creed has an answer for everything. And so to walk away from that and not have something else waiting for you on the other side after 30 plus years is by definition, crossing the threshold into adventure. You're plunging into the unknown. And Andy did this. And he's been out for a number of years now. And he's still on this journey of learning, knowing about himself, and then embodying what he is learning in the world, becoming more authentically himself, right? And investigating his beliefs and questioning them. That's the hero's journey again in a nutshell. You don't have to physically go anywhere. Anytime you go within and investigate yourself, rigorously, and you discover something new about yourself, and you integrate that into yourself and make it a part of who you are consciously, that's the cycle. And so, as you can imagine, you can do this cycle many, many times. And we often do. I mean, both physically and spiritually, right? Anytime we have a revelation about ourselves or about the world or about God, and it transforms what you believe and how you behave and how you think, that's the cycle of transformation that I'm referring to and that Joseph Campbell was talking about. Again, it's kind of abstract, but I think Andy's story is a really good example of somebody plunging into the unknown, experiencing a totally new world, right? Because that's what it is when you leave the Jehovah's Witnesses. You're plunging into the unknown. And then in that process, he got to know himself. He learned things about himself, and he is slowly but surely transforming himself and his life in a deliberate manner, right? It's a beautiful thing to see. Another example that I know about is my friend Cressa, who will be on the podcast in the near future. Cressa was diagnosed with a chronic condition many years ago, and she was a stressed out mother of three and overworked and all these different things, and then she got this condition, and it was basically presented to her as you either get surgery or you suffer for the rest of your life. And that's the threshold, right? She said, no thanks, I'm going to figure this out on my own. I'm going to sort this out myself. So she plunged into the unknown. She left the sort of Western medicine paradigm behind and began her own journey of healing. And over time, she was able to heal herself. And many, many years later now, she's still doing very well. So again, lots happened in those years, but that stuff that happened is the road of trials, the circumstances that test us and help us get to know ourselves and become more authentically who and what we truly are. And so believe me when I say this cycle can go on, and every time you successfully complete the cycle, the circle gets bigger. And you begin to realize more and more about yourself. And even though you're still circling the same thing every time, your perspective gets larger and larger. And over time, you will most likely experience deeper realizations about who and what you are, and your divine source, and your connection to that source, your direct not just connection. I mean, you're synonymous with it, right? You are that source. You are an aspect or a manifestation of it. And eventually, if you keep the cycle going, you will get to those types of revelations, because that's what, again, the Buddha and Jesus did. They're examples, again, of the heroic archetypes, in not the warrior archetype, of course, the savior archetype. The one that sacrifices himself, or the one that experiences great temptation and then finds enlightenment on the other side, and then returns to the masses to share what he or she has discovered. That's another heroic archetype. And the revelation that Jesus was trying to get through to everybody, in my personal opinion, and most Gnostics and mystics will agree, is that, guess what? You're it. You're it. The Christ is in all of us. Not Jesus, not the Jewish carpenter, but what he discovered in himself, Christ consciousness. That is in all of us. And at your most essential, that's who and what you truly are. And so if you keep that cycle going, you're going to learn and expand your awareness of yourself until eventually you realize that you're it. It's that simple. Of course, it's simple because we can't really talk about it that much. You kind of have to experience it in order for it to make sense. And you can intellectualize it and fetishize it, and you can even believe it. But when you experience it, belief is no longer relevant. If I tell you, hey, you're watching a YouTube video right now, you don't have to believe it. You know you're doing that. You're experiencing it right now. So it's kind of the same.